My name is Audrey Cooper, and I'm the director of the UNM Evaluation Lab. My job is to leverage the resources of the university in service to community here in New Mexico. And our particular way of doing that at the lab is through capacity building in terms of evaluation skills and services. So we serve the community by working with community nonprofits as well as government entities. And we have a graduate fellowship for graduate and PhD students, and it's interdisciplinary. All students on campus are welcome to apply. We have a 2-semester cohort where students are placed within community organizations, government projects. They're placed in community organizations and government entities with a professional evaluator or faculty member at UNM to conduct 2 semesters worth of planning and implementation of evaluation. And we use a community-based participatory research approach. So we center political action, not partisan action, but the political action of making change. And so we want to make positive change within communities here in New Mexico, and we use evaluation as a tool. And what that means is we don't want our final projects or products or reports to live in a binder on a shelf. We want them to be implemented so that the findings of the evaluation in concert with the priorities of the organization are used to produce meaningful change to whatever community interest, problem, or policy that we are evaluating. We also hold capacity building with the UNM Summer Institute, the Evaluation Lab Summer Institute, where we invite community organizations and nonprofits to attend a 5-day intensive, and they walk away with a fully fledged evaluation plan and intense 5-day training. We also do side projects. We have a monthly Echo Learning community as well, which is a community of practice for all levels of evaluators to come and learn about part of an evaluation, as well as workshop any issues that an organization might be experiencing regarding evaluation with professional evaluators.
People have a lot of definitions that come to mind for them when they're thinking of evaluation. Reports, surveys, data, like you said, something that just might live on a shelf. So you got into this, but could you provide a little more detail or an example of evaluation as a tool for strengthening communities and for creating that meaningful change that you talked about?
Sure. I think evaluation, the way that we practice it at the lab, is again about making change. And so I was recently described to me by one of our alum that policy is simply identifying a problem and trying to find a solution for it, especially at the community level. And I appreciate that because that's what we do in evaluation. And so using a community-based participatory research process, the approach, the main goal is to take action, to make meaningful change. And so we work really hard to integrate community voice in solving or addressing their own problems or preserving what's working. So we don't necessarily need to make change, but sometimes it's about telling the story of what works. Looking at strengths in a community and how to protect, promote, or preserve them. And sometimes it is about making change. And usually it's both, right? It's like, what do we want to keep? What do we want to change? And in this way, community members who are engaged in these evaluations get to be overt and state their values, and then use those values as the basis of making decisions, both from the aspect of like, what do we want to know? What do we want to change? What do we want to keep? And we use those values to guide us all the way through the methodology and then the findings and analysis of the evaluation work. So that's
Yeah.
one way that we use to strengthen community engagement and process, is really building capacity in this sort of way of thinking to solve problems.
Yeah. Could I ask you to share a little bit about, like, I am thinking of that you could choose a different example, but I'm thinking of the work that you all did with the Flamenco Institute that I got to learn about at that presentation, where they entered the evaluation space with you all. And I don't know exactly what type of partner you describe them as, but they thought maybe they'd have to talk about their work in a different way or make it more quantitative or something in order to have an effective evaluation process in terms of seeking funding. And you all really dug into their values, and exactly what you said, they actually came away with a plan for evaluation based around their own values instead of contorting into something else. Could you speak to that a little bit?
One of the beautiful things about working in the evaluation lab is our insistence that the organization we work with is the expert of their own work. And so we come in with tools and skills on evaluation, and then we simultaneously incorporate the wisdom and expertise of the agency we're working with. Oftentimes, especially community organizations, they come in with an idea that evaluation has to be a specific complement of methods, let's say. So it has to be a survey tool that produces numerical data, quantitative data,
Mhm.
to be able to appease, let's say, a board of directors or funders, or the executive director. And it feels very intimidating because it doesn't feel aligned with anything that the organization cares about. And what we do is we say, wait a minute, let's get to methods in a little bit. We start like any researcher or evaluator would. We say, like, what do you care about? What are the questions you want to have answered? What are your core values? What's your North Star, right? What matters the most to you? And we have that conversation first because it helps us ground in producing an evaluation that centers on what the organization really cares about and where the real opportunity is to make change.
Yeah.
And so, in being able to do that, we open the door to all kinds of methods. Collecting stories, doing focus groups, and certainly developing surveys. Like, I'm not, uh, I'm not here to say that that's not a worthy method, but certainly the goal is to actually honor the values and intents of the organization and not do an evaluation that meets the needs of a constituent without meeting the needs of the organization itself. So one of the things that we do is we teach organizations, for example, how to talk to their funders
Mm.
about what a meaningful evaluation looks like. And is there any way that the funder could be at the table as a partner, but not fully dictating what an evaluation, how an evaluation could be meaningful to the organization. So a recent example is we worked with the National Institute of Flamenco, and they entered the conversation of evaluation. um, they had lots of different ideas and directions they wanted to go in, and our team lead in this case really helped them formulate this idea of what they really cared about. And it helped them decide that what they really wanted to measure was a sense of social cohesion. Or, is that was really meaningful to them as an underpinning or a core foundational element of dance. And there's a greater significance to what youth are experiencing in the state in terms of perhaps loss of social cohesion, and that they're a force for good in maintaining that value. And that was after quite a bit of work of like really dialing in on what mattered to this organization. And that, I think, is part of the beauty of the evaluation lab, is that we help organizations get to that point.
Your career has wound around a fair amount to get you to this point of being the director of the evaluation lab here at UNM. So we'd love to hear about what inspired that journey, um, how those experiences shaped the way you're now approaching this work with community engagement. Um, and then if it comes to mind as you're talking about that one community partnership or project that has had a particularly meaningful impact on you or is really sticking with you that you'd want to make sure we got to hear about.
Cool. So I think I can do the first two, but you might not need to remind me of the
Okay.
third.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yes, I've had a circuitous path towards becoming the director of the evaluation lab. To me, it all makes sense, but I can see as an outside perspective how, um, I am from rural upstate New York. I grew up on a dead end dirt road. Um, and I have my bachelor's in English literature. Then I went to nursing school. I did 2 years of AmeriCorps in community health on the border of Mexico and the United States. And it brought me to Albuquerque doing nonprofit work for many years in the clinical or public health setting. So doing clinical quality work, which is like a form of assessment and
Hmm.
monitoring in healthcare, as well as direct clinical work with patients in community health. And that brought me to public health and doing my master's in public health here at UNM, which made me feel very much like I could connect all of my experiences together, that they all made sense to me, that the stories of people, the health and well-being of community defined really broadly, not just healthcare, for example, but like the true well-being of a population is predicated on um, many interwoven complexities, um, and that one core element of those complexities that I felt really inclined to dive into was interconnectedness and community, how we connect with one another and how we build community together, as well as how we make decisions about what matters to us in our lives as a community. And to me, that's a beautiful merger of all my experiences and why evaluation makes sense to me, because it helps us roadmap who we want to be as a community and how we want to take action to be that, to be who we are, right? And that the health and well-being of all of us is dependent on our relationships with one another. And so my work in the evaluation lab has this uh, foundation of relational coordination as well as emotional intelligence. These are skills that we try to build intentionally into our work. And as merged or married with the sort of policy analysis of evaluation technical skills and products.
Is there like one community partnership or project that particularly comes to mind as emblematic of these types of impacts and this interconnectedness?
Um, yeah, I thought of so many projects when you asked this question. And one that comes to mind is I worked for several years through the lab with an organization called Serenum. And Serenom's been a partner of the lab for 6 years now. And they are a transitional housing program for unhoused families. And we have done many evaluations mapping their theories, their processes, and developing a way to longitudinally measure their impact. More so than what they do, what I loved about working with them is a foundational part of myself and the lab, which is building trust. Um, when I started working with them, uh, I just laid everything out on the table in terms of my personal and professional self. Um, I asked them to trust me, and they did. And these were people who they really assembled a team that represented various parts of the organization. They came with different perspectives, and they're very astute and they're wonderful questioners. And so it's not because they didn't want to challenge me, but we developed a sense of trust together that I think really created harmony in the partnership. And um, and it was a truly, it felt truly magical at times, um, to have them trust me, somewhat of an outsider. But part of that is because what we do in the lab is take time to know our folks, our partners, to really put ourselves in a chameleon place where we care about what they care about, and honor what they honor. And that's how we build trust. And Saranom was such a beautiful organization to work with because they bought in so quickly. Um, and because we worked together in this high trust environment, they were able to ask really hard questions, and I was able to answer them in an equally fierce kind of way, right?
Yeah.
Tell them the truth, right? And that's ideal as an evaluator. We want to all be in a space where we're not tiptoeing around one another, but where we can actually um, make change together.
So I think you've been touching on how the community engaged work that you all do is exactly like you said about building relationships that are trusting, that are real to both sides of that relationship, and how you're making sure that community voices are engaged in and defined in what success looks like. And I also feel like you've been touching on the importance of justice and equity in this work and the ways that it's enfolded or kind of necessary to even envisioning the work that you're doing. So is there anything else that you want to speak to about how those components of prioritizing community voices, the community partner itself defining their own success, or how justice and equity are part of that you haven't kind of touched on? Or was there anything, especially when you're kind of looking over this question list, that you wanted to be sure to say about that type of work that you all do?
Yeah, I think, I'm not a scholar, but at the heart of justice for me is this idea of fairness. And I think when I think about fairness at the community level, it means that people are allowed to engage um, in determining their own fate as a community. Not just allowed, that they're actively doing that to the level that they want to participate. And that means that they have the capacity to do so, right? So when we look at what it takes communities to be engaged in, let's say, democratization, there's a certain level of knowledge base and skill development that's required for people to understand what's at stake, from a policy level, what changes, problems, or strengths exist in their community that they want to preserve. And to me, the evaluation lab contributes to that value of justice and fairness by building that kind of capacity so that decisions can be made by people who interact with us, that they have frameworks and skills not only to recognize that policies are developed based on values, but that their values are really important to what policies are enacted, and that they're that ownership over those policies is a matter of capacity development. And I think that in our own small way, in our own small shop, that's a value that we hold high and that we try to continuously insert into our practice when we work within communities and organizations. Like I'll say to community constituents that I'm working with, I'll say, take this report, give it to your legislator, you know, or give it to the administrator. Um, this is your words and your contributions. Show them what we found in it, right? Use this to help. Like this has the seal of UNM on it. Like, there's ways in which um, that helps to produce some credibility for communities to take hold of their own and of their own values and information, their own findings to make change.
We're the Office of Community Engagement, and we've started to reach out to you, but we're new. You've been doing this community engaged work for a long time. And is there anything you'd want to say about how you see the Office of Community Engagement being part of supporting the community engaged work that's already been happening at UNM with places like the Evaluation Lab, or what type of support you want to see?
Yeah, I think that one area, I mean, this is sort of like, I think, discussed ad nauseum across New Mexico, is that idea of silos. There's like, I mean, how many of us are in like 2 to 3 person departments or whatever, trying to do community engaged work across campus? And so, from my perspective for the provost's office, it's like finding all of us, right? And then maybe strengthening us through numbers alone, right? I think that community facing, community engaged work is often, in my experience working at the university, it's a labor of love, and perhaps it's underfunded and under recognized as a true diplomat for the university, right? Um, I think understanding the contributions of community engaged work at the university, in terms of building camaraderie or building um, goodwill with, people who are in our communities, people in the legislature, people in professional organizations across the state. We bring value to the university in that way. We do work for the university in that way. And I think that finding ways to really value all of us, and what we contribute would be very meaningful. So find us, find a way to mobilize us, and then find a way to understand what we contribute, and then value that contribution.
You all do so much work with students, and you mentioned that at the beginning. Is there a particular aspect of the student work you do, or a particular student experience that you'd like to touch on or speak to?
I have one student in mind who started with the Evaluation Lab as a fellow. She didn't know anything about evaluation. I mean, she didn't think she knew anything about evaluation. That's all of us. And um, she chose her organization that she partnered with, because she chose her organization as Saranam to partner with, because she recognized in the experiences that Saranam worked with the vulnerabilities of communities in New Mexico. And it resonated with her because she is born and raised here and grew up around many of the same vulnerabilities. And so she was able to partner with an area of interest that resonated with her very personally. And the more that she immersed herself in the evaluation process and the fellowship, the more confident she grew in not only understanding sort of the root causes of things like, you know, childhood, um, our predominant child issues that occur in childhood, when we look at our data across the state, whether it be reading levels or abuse or childhood illness, that there's certain linkages that thread those together. And so the more that this person interacted with that experience, the more she got to see both the stratifications of cause and effect. And then the more she developed tools and skills to do something about it, to analyze, to understand, um, and to take action on uh, this experience that she had her whole life observing a place that she loved, right? And since then, she has continued to do this kind of work, right? She's continued to take on evaluation projects that tackle issues of social determinants of health, for example, and continued to pour her investment back into her state, right? And to me, that is the goal here, right? She's sort of a prime example of what we're hoping as our small part of the evaluation lab, is to have someone come in, really see a critical need here in the state, or see an area of strength and work towards understanding it, towards relating to it, and then building their career around that, right? And so she's just a wonderful example of that through line.
The work you're excited about continuing to do and what gives you hope about the importance of this work. Anything you'd like to speak to with that, we'd love to hear about, in addition to anything else you're just like, I need to say this about the evaluation lab, you know?
Yeah. I would emphasize that the evaluation lab offers any organization, in the university system that offers workforce development experience in a real life setting, um, provides the kind of training that you can't manufacture in the classroom. And with all due respect to the classroom. Um, and so while our cohorts are, 8 to 10 people, the impact per person is so much greater. A lot of our students go on to become evaluators or use evaluation in their careers. Anytime we can equip people with the tools and skills to make decisions in such high stakes areas as healthcare, as climate change, as even, transportation policy, um, all the different areas that the state needs, we contribute to the learnings of the students who go out and do that work. And we want people to use values-based decision frameworks to make decisions. Um, we want those decisions to be inclusive. We want those decisions not to leave people behind. And in ensuring that we teach values of community-based participatory research process, that we use inclusive practices, that we teach why talking to all manner of constituents is critical for policy and decision making, that builds the ability of the workforce to do the same. And not only can the workforce do that in their day jobs, but they can do that in the voting booth, in how they make decisions for their kids, yeah, in everyday areas that we make decisions in the way that we live our lives. Having the more tools and skills to do so is only a benefit to our society. My name is Audrey Cooper, and I'm the director of the UNM Evaluation Lab.